is locking some of their drivers out during non-peak time. This is in response and thanks to a New York state law which is supposed to protect and enable the drivers to have more rights. Is it working? Let's dive into it. So the New York government passed a law which requires Uber to pay all active drivers at least minimum wage as long as they're on shift. And in response to that, Uber started locking drivers out, basically prohibiting drivers from having the potential to pick up rides so that they can still earn a profit. I mean, I think that seems reasonable. So let's dive into the context of what's going on. And then I want to examine what's better. Is it the free market doing what the free market does? Or should we allow daddy government to govern harder? Uber's locking out New York state drivers to avoid paying them for idle time. Last month, Uber began locking drivers out of the app system in order to limit the amount of company pays for idle time when drivers aren't driving with the passenger. Uber drivers in the Big Apple are fuming over the move, says their income has dropped by as much as 50% according to Bloomberg News. I used to work 10 hours and make 300 to 350. Now I just work 10 hours and I barely made 170. I was so disappointed. I'm paying for my gas and I cannot make money. The move by Uber is in response to a 6-year-old rule passed by New York State Taxi and Limousine Commission, according to which rideshare apps must pay minimum to drivers during idle periods in order to cover expenses. So once again, the government comes in. First problem, drivers aren't making enough money. I mean, honestly, 10-hour day, $350, that seems fine. Maybe not for cost of living in New York, but like, let's be honest, that's a decent wage for driving people around. And the government comes in and says, hey, when they're idle, you have to pay them to Uber and other rideshare apps. This, on the surface, seems reasonable. However, what happens in response? Once again, government incapable of understanding secondary and tertiary effect, dare I say Cobra effect, and as a result, drivers are now making less money. According to the TLC, I assume that's the Taxi and Limousine Commission, Uber and Lyft are on the hook for what it calls a minimum per trip payment formula, which takes into account drivers' total work time, encompassing time spent driving passengers as well as time spent waiting to dispatch. The longer the wait time before drivers pick up a passenger, the more Uber and Lyft need to pay in order to meet the TLC mandated minimum. So what does Uber do? Cut the amount of drivers waiting. This seems like a natural free market response. You cannot halfway govern the free market. You need to go full communism or get out of the way and let the free market reign. The current NYC pay formula is broken because of the way it measures utilization works against drivers, not for them, the company said in a statement. It forces rideshare companies to limit when drivers can earn and therefore how much they can earn. Boom, nailed it. The government has applied here in this case, but also in a broader case, the government has applied an old law to a new form of business. When the TLC, the Taxi Limousine Commission, was invented, there was no Uber. There was no rideshare. There was no gig economy. There was no pick up a few passengers on your way home from work to earn a couple extra bucks. There was only the big behemoths. And now, in this new age, the government, or in this case, the governing body, has said, well, let's just apply the same rules to the old industry. It doesn't work like that.
New York City used to be a top market for driver earnings due to local legislation requiring rideshare companies to pay drivers for the idle time between rides. But now it seems like the rideshare companies are looking for a way to skirt around those rules.
Boom. So this is a great example. At first, when the government installed these new rules, it looked promising. Drivers were earning more. However, the parent company, the people that actually were able to pay the bills, was not able to earn more. And as a result, they went after their own interests. We can blame capitalism for this. We can look Uber in the eye and say, how dare you protect your drivers? But at the end of the day, if Uber isn't making money, if Uber goes bankrupt, how many more of those drivers fail? Those drivers do not have the capability to build an Uber equivalent. That's why they rely on Uber. So I think we should give Uber some slack here.
Uber is locking New York City drivers out of its app during periods of low demand in an attempt to fight these minimum pay requirements. Lyft is also planning to implement this in New York City. Some drivers have reported being locked out for as long as over an hour. Currently, the minimum wage for rideshare drivers in New York City is around $17.22 per hour after expenses.
I'm not sure what minimum wage is in New York, but that's much higher than like flipping. I would much rather sit in my air-conditioned car waiting for passengers.
The lockouts, which began last month, are aimed at limiting how much non-passenger time drivers are able to log and be paid for. But is this fair to the drivers? And if other similar pieces of legislation are passed in other parts of the country, will we also see similar action for the rideshare companies?
Yes, you will. As legislation passes, which restricts the free market from operating freely, you will continue to see workaround rules in response, because there's no way, absolutely no way, can the bureaucratic government keep up to the innovation and pace of the free market. And when you put barriers in the way of entrepreneurs are programmed. They are physically designed to blow through the barriers.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
It's not really about whether or not it's fair. It's about who has the power and who's going to take charge. Because any driver is capable of developing an app and creating the network that Uber has. The problem is they aren't. The problem is they don't. Maybe they were too late. Maybe their circumstances would allow them to. Regardless, it doesn't mean it's fair or not fair. What it means is you have to respect the power which Uber holds. And when you put a barrier in the way, the free market's going to blow it over. Honestly, if this goes to lawsuit, you can kiss Uber goodbye in New York. We're already seeing New York take this aggressive, over-compliant stance for Bitcoin. And as a result, living in New York City sucks if you want to buy Bitcoin. If you want to sue Uber for not paying their drivers when the drivers aren't driving, then you're going to be able to say goodbye to Uber. It will limit competition. Taxi prices will skyrocket and everyone will suffer. When you take the freedom out of the free market, everybody suffers over the long run. You might have short bursts of success, but over the long run, everything gets worse because you cannot possibly imagine the multitude of butterfly effects that come in when you take a pinhole view to a macroeconomic lens. Is it even legal to force a company to keep a workforce online if there's no work? On the flip side, Uber could pull out of NYC and altogether leaving those drivers with nothing. Exactly. This is exactly the point that I'm saying. Guys, do not limit the entrepreneurs. Let them do their thing, because when incentives are aligned, Uber wants as many drivers as possible, making as much money as possible, while Uber can make a profit. If Uber's profits are too big, there will be a competitor, a la Lyft, come into play to lower those prices. If Uber's prices are too small, then Uber literally blows up and all of those drivers are left with nothing. They're not skirting around any rules. They're trying to protect their companies from being driven to bankruptcy due to overreaching governments that can't tell the difference between cab and rideshare company. Boom! This man is a Bitcoiner.
New at noon, Uber drivers protesting the company over lockout allegations. Members of the Independent Drivers Guild say many of them are getting unfairly locked out of the app, preventing them from working. Today, drivers are leading a caravan along the Queensboro Bridge before a planned rally in front of Uber headquarters. We've reached out to Uber and are awaiting a response.
So they can't drive for money, and so they're going to drive around for no money to protest that they're not making enough money when they're driving around. I don't know. This honestly just kind of looks like entitlement to me. I do not understand the mindset. This is like same thing with the strikes and stuff. Like, we need to lower our time preference as a community. We need to lower our time preference as a society. When you take an entitled attitude, you never ever win in the long run. Conversely, if you understand that you are providing more value than you're currently getting paid, your power, the power dynamic in that relationship shifts. And you have the ability to go somewhere and say, hey, I want more. You have the ability to go to your boss, to go to your customers, to go wherever you may please and demand more. But if you've put yourself in a position where you do not have the power dynamic, you have to keep grinding. You have to keep working. That might not be fair, but a three-legged deer gets eaten first by a lion. And at the end of the day, the free market will always reign, no matter how many signs we put up that says don't eat three-legged deer. Makes sense. I tried to work today and it would not turn on for 1 second. I just came back home. If you were motivated to work, this lockout will make you lose your motivation to work very quickly for sure. So we have Uber responding to legislation and we have less drivers able to make money when the legislation was designed to help the drivers earn more money. See, this is what happens when we look at single issues. You are not able to actually measure success. The issue here was not help drivers earn more money. It was make Uber pay more. But when the solution is make somebody else pay more, entrepreneurs, again, they always find a way to blast through that barrier. And in response, Uber is probably making more and paying less because they're now locking people out. Late stage capitalism, gig economy. I can't help but wonder where, if it was a free market, the barrier to entry wouldn't be so high. If the barrier to entry wasn't so high, there'd be more than just Uber and Lyft. If the government's role was to reduce the barriers to entry as much as humanly possible, we'd have more competition. We all know what happens when you have more competition.
Raise our pay! No driver! No Uber! No driver! No Uber! No Uber!
What are you gonna do then? Like, what do you think's gonna happen if Uber pulls out? The cabs are just gonna raise money. No drivers, no Uber. I mean, they're not wrong, right? The power dynamic is shifting, and in numbers, the drivers have the upper hand. However, at a certain point, with so much red tape in the business, it will make much more sense for Uber just to leave. And then there will be no Uber, but there will still be drivers. I do Uber online. Most likely. I will do Uber after work on July 17. Joe Biden has effed up this country so bad, I can't afford to take days off. He's talking about the money. The money is broken, and when you break the money, you break the world. And so conversely, when you fix the money, you fix the world. If these people had the ability to save their time, to store the value they create with their time in a protocol that was so perfectly designed and masterfully captured the ability to project and propel that value into the future. It's just the economy, these governments, this red tape, the ability to limit the free market always wrecks society. And we've been brainwashed. Guys, they are actively telling us, they are actively proposing that more rules will equal somehow a freer market, that more rules will give people more power. More rules gives one group of people power, and it's whoever's in charge. It's the popularity contest of the democracy that we currently live in. When you have more rules, you have less power. When you have less power, you have less options. When you have less options, you pay more and suffer more. This is the way the physics of the world, the physics of the economy works. I mean, we have Tesla starting to announce robo-taxes. We have Elon sharing visions of a robo-tax. Those are probably 5 to 10 years away. How far are we from drivers just being completely obliterated? And is New York City and legislation that New York City State is passing, is that enabling or helping? Or are the rules helping drivers? I mean, it seems to me that the rule was passed and drivers' rights, drivers' economic freedom is getting worse. So you tell me, am I off base here? Is my math wrong? Am I not reading the situation correctly? Or when you try to govern a free market, do things get a little less free? My name's Adam. Like and subscribe if you want more of these hot takes, you want more of Adam ranting into the camera. But most importantly, do yourself and your future generations a favor and stay sovereign.